So, something interesting just happened was I made a recording that was supposed to be very short, and I just kind of started going down this tangent. It just started flowing as I was talking about um, parts of this recording I'm currently making. So, there's going to be some repeat, okay? Because I had actually written down a bunch of material trying to be a little more structured in my recordings, but it just kind of started flowing out. So there's going to be some repeat material, but I'm going to say everything here anyway. Um, and so I'm going to talk about my rationale for using psilocybin and my perspective on it, um, from a position and from a person who really um, looks at everything with very clear head, okay, and clear eyes. I look at it, and because I've been thinking, or I've been actually researching. It didn't start off as direct research, but um, I'll say this: I've been consuming material on YouTube and whatnot from people who are in discussion of psilocybin for a few years now. Okay. And I've been listening to what they say, um, and listening to a bunch of data points, looking at the people who are using it, the synthetic psilocybin or psilocin in therapeutic studies. Okay. And um, because someone close to me was an alcohol who had alcohol addiction, um, started to experiment with it for treating it. Um, and I don't actually know what happened to them, but I actually um, took all their homegrown product off their hands, and that came into my possession. Okay. And I sat on it for a while, right? And but that's and then consuming all this research, I made the decision that I would go into this self experiment and and discuss it. So anyway, um, I'm not going to discuss in this recording the research and studies that are occurring right now, going on in many of our um, more revered universities and institutions, medical research facilities, and in labs and big pharma labs. They're doing all kinds of research right now on psilocybin and MDMA and ketamine and other things. So I'm not. You can read about these things elsewhere and how it appears to cure depression, um, potentially cure PTSDs of various forms, um, curing various addictions, um, improving cognitive abilities, and possibly causing neurogenesis. Um, Neurogenesis is creating new neural pathways in the brain. So, in a sense, it's like saying you get smarter. Although I don't, my personal feeling is that the brain is not where consciousness resides. Okay, your consciousness is your true intelligence. Or actually, I don't want to go down this tangent right now. Okay, we'll skip that. I'll make that into another talk. But anyway, you can hear about all these studies in printed reports. You can learn about it in TED Talks, YouTube discussions all over the place, and podcasts. Okay. So if you want to consume what these studies are doing on all these experiments with actually curing depression and curing PTSD, it's not a band aid solution. You're not just covering over it. There's actually curing and complete removal of these conditions from people's lives. Okay. So anyway, I want to focus on how to use it for pursuing greater self-discovery by healthy, clear-headed individuals. Hopefully by individuals who have at least a small understanding of the light and of their greater purpose in life. Okay, so that's the focus of all my discussions and all my recordings. So I believe that the effects of psilocybin are different for everyone to some degree. And I feel like it depends upon your consciousness, your personal understanding of life, and from reality to whatever delusions you're under. And I'm classifying as delusion as what a lot of people will consider normal life. Okay. And also how clean and pure you have made your consciousness and your daily expression in life, like how you view life, how your conduct and expression to life is. Like if you're pessimistic, or if you've got a lot of negative feelings and negative impulses and negative expressions of like jealousy or hatred or greed, or all these destructive expressions that so many of humanity are under duress from. Okay, so I feel that psilocybin is going to affect you depending upon all these things in a different manner, and I think that's a very honest assessment. And I will like to also say I believe that the ideal scenario is for an individual that has zero expression of any of these negative conditions in life. Okay? And I feel I'm very close to zero negative expression. So that's my personal assessment. Because I've been doing work and homework on my life for many decades, for about 3 decades now. So anyway, so how I'm experiencing it is going to be different than others. And the other factor is that I think is very important is how is your understanding of energy in life, number one. And if you have any understanding about how to keep yourself energetically protected and insulated from the destructive expressions of mankind that collect in the atmosphere of Earth. It's just vibration. And just like you throw a rock into a pond, it ripples out. But it doesn't go anywhere until some illumined individuals consume it, consciously consume it. Okay, so again, that's a different topic. But so all these factors I think are the most important to consider, okay, when using psilocybin. I'm only speaking about psilocybin. So the way I experience psilocybin is like a chemically induced deep meditation. And it can be with eyes open or eyes closed. It doesn't really matter. Your experience is a little different. Okay, the experience from eyes open to eyes closed is, there's some slight differences. And I don't know if I really need to get into those. And there's different differences if you do it at night, like while you're laying in bed versus in the daytime. I've talked about that already. So I'm considering my experience of psilocybin ingestion is a chemically induced deep meditation, and as I've said before, it feels like your body consciousness just kind of gets reduced dramatically. Like you just kind of, I don't know, it's like your consciousness kind of gets pulled away from your body in a sense where it becomes isolated, and you feel like you have a real firmer grip on your consciousness to use like a scalpel, like I've said before, where you can really assess and go deep into considering things in life. And even going deep into the stillness where you're completely still, where you're not doing anything with your consciousness at all, except just being in the moment in complete and utter stillness. So there's many different levels of it, but that's how I'm experiencing it. The only visuals I'm really experiencing with 3 or 4 grams, or even more. I mean, sometimes I'll do 3 plus 3, but you may get some fractaling. It's almost like rainbow fractals, okay? But for the most part, it's just a brightening of your vision. And so when you look at nature, it just seems like it's more vibrant, okay? There's no crazy hallucinations of any kind. That's all it is. That's all my experience is. And I'm not taking weak mushrooms. These are penis envies and some golden teachers that are grown by a couple that I know that I think he isolated some genetics in this in these golden teachers that I would say they're just as potent as the penis envies, and maybe even more so. They're a little bit more visual than the penis envies I have. So anyway, I'm just sharing all this so you know exactly from the level I'm speaking of this, okay? So everything's kind of clear and there's no obscurity, there's no, I want everything completely transparent as possible. So anyway, and on top of that, you need to be careful of the foods you take. Like, it's way better to do this on an empty stomach. Way better. Because everything is very measured then. I mean, it's all comes on very clean and very strong and very consistent. It's very measured. If you eat it on a full belly, it's just different. Sometimes it gets delayed for hours sometimes. And it gets stretched out in a way that's not measurable. So I just recommend doing everything on an empty stomach. So, all right. So with all that said, that's how I'm experiencing psilocybin. It comes on clean and it disappears clean. There's no highs and lows. There's no crazy behavior. And you're very clear. There is a great amount of clarity in thought and feeling. Tremendous amount of clarity. It just removes like any background noise, really, that may be there. And that's my experience of it. Okay, so anyway, now I want to get into other things, which is if you want to be very honest about, all the food and drink we ingest is technically a mind-altering substance. Every bit of it, from carrots to, bread to, cereals, rice, beans, all of it, all the vegetables, they're all mind-altering substances and chemicals. you're putting into your body that are making changes in your body, okay? And there are hundreds of thousands of chemicals flowing through your body all the time. I think there's more than that, but I want to say someone was saying there's millions of different chemicals in the body, okay? And the things we put into our body are always altering that and making the brain and parts of the brain, you know, the pituitary gland, and whatnot, all these different glands we have in our body secrete different chemicals in the body as a reaction. I mean, our bodies are tremendous chemical laboratories. And we know so little about all these interactions, okay? So tobacco, alcohol, sugar, caffeine, all these things are addictive substances that most of mankind is using on a regular basis. All over the planet. It's kind of normalized that all these are used on a regular basis, okay? And what's interesting is all these things are addictive and are basically turn everybody into a chemical slave. That's the brutal honesty of it. People are enslaved by these chemicals all the time, all over the planet. And it is normalized, like it's not really discussed. You can do it amongst family members, all four of these things. And it's not even recognized that you're taking a drug. Okay? But if someone, you know, popped out some cocaine or some marijuana, or God forbid, some psychedelic, like mushrooms, they would look at you cross-eyed, right? And basically, you know, it'd be like a what the fuck moment. Like what you're doing, like the drugs that these are tremendously different than the drugs that are normalized. And we're not even talking about the drugs everybody on from Big Pharma, which are more dangerous than anything else we've talked about so far. And, you know, so anyway, that's just, right? Am I not being honest about that? Let me know. So anyway, moving on. All four of these things I'm talking about, the tobacco, alcohol, sugar, caffeine, could kill you very easily. You take too much caffeine, like these powdered caffeines that people are putting in their workout routines, people are dying by mixing up the amounts. Caffeine will kill you very easily. Sugar kills you much slower, does it not, right? Alcohol can kill you in a single day if you take too much. And tobacco also kills you very slowly. Now, I think it could probably kill you if you smoke too much in a single day. I think it could. Other studies, has that happened? I don't know exactly. I think that there's potential in that. So, but if you take, all right, we'll move on. I'll come back to that. So let's get into other things now. So besides that, those things can kill you very easily. I am personally way more concerned about taking pain medications like, you know, Tylenol, Advil, and regular aspirin than psilocybin. Way more concerned. Because these things are all made in a laboratory and they all have a downside. Again, all these things can kill you if you take too much. And I am way more concerned. I think a lot about before, you know, if I have a headache, which is kind of rare, but if I have a headache, I will really think if I really need to take, you know, the pain, you know, Tylenol or something, or if I can just deal with it, you know, because if we have a headache, it's probably because we made an error in our life. Like we mix certain foods that should not be mixed. I mean, that's a common thing that gives people headaches, that they're not even aware about. They don't even recognize that you should not be mixing certain foods together. Like they will produce a chemical compound in your body that will wreck you. Like, very innocuous stuff like pineapple and cauliflower. If you mix those two together, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Okay? And there's all kinds of chemical mixing that people do just eating their lunch, just eating their dinner. And it can build up in the body and cause problems over time. So eating, this is a totally different topic, but eating simple foods, just very simple things like some nuts and some beans and a carrot, is way better than having a very complex concoction of foods. All right. So anyway, that's whole another tangent. But so let's get into pharma now. So the practice of big pharma, of isolating the chemical compounds in plants and making a refined and potent synthetic version of what nature's providing, is a very dangerous practice. All right. But it makes them a lot of money because they can produce these patents on these chemical compounds that, locks in their profits for a long time. And so that's why they do it. They don't want to just grow plants and say, here, take some ginger root or, this or that. They want to isolate certain specific chemicals that they can, patent and, lock in their profits. So, but it's a very dangerous practice because it makes their drugs become very addictive. And sometimes it's life-wrecking addictiveness. Like these opioid epidemic, we're just, fully recognizing right now. And when you isolate these compounds out of nature, instead of ingesting the whole plant, it causes a lot of dangerous side effects. And then on top of that, once you start having these side effects, they'll start to prescribe you other drugs to deal with the side effects. And you may have one, two, or three other drugs just to deal with the side effects of your initial drug they're prescribing you. It is absolute insane behavior that is so normalized in society right now, and people are completely asleep to, okay? And then on top of that, there's a cascading effect of self-destruction at that point, and great expense from people's pocketbooks. And to top it off, all of pharma's drugs do nothing to solve the underlying issue that you even came to the doctor with. It doesn't solve the underlying issue and cause. All these things are treating the effects, and it kind of dulls one's experience of the problem. That's all it's doing, is it kind of dulls your experience of the problem, and you feel relief, right? And you're like, oh, okay, this is helping me. But the price you're paying of having to take this thing on an everyday basis or multiple times in the day, and then potentially the side effects that arise, and potentially taking drugs to deal with those side effects, and you tell me that is not complete idiocy and dangerous, okay? It is just such idiotic behavior. And people are slaves to this now. This is what's been structured into societal behavior as a norm. So, again, moving on, this type of behavior, people never really get well, and very often end up in a very destructive downward spiral of prescription drug dependency and ever increasing physical decline. Okay? Is there anything I said that is not brutal honesty? Have I said anything that could be, that could be any kind of conjecture or a conspiracy theory? I'd like to know. What does anybody out there think of anything I'm saying? Are they in disagreement? I'd like to know if you're in disagreement. So, moving on. All right. So, in comparison to this, to the big pharma drugs, and to the normalized drugs everybody take of tobacco, alcohol, caffeine, and sugar. Okay, those are the normalized drugs, and there's other ones. I don't want to go too deep into all this. So in comparison to big pharma drugs and the normalized drugs that we consume on a daily basis, psilocybin, from my perspective, is much, much safer. It is non-addicting and doesn't appear to have any side effects. It doesn't cause highs and lows, on your mood effects. And it doesn't affect your energy levels. I mean, I guess you could say being in the meditation is lowering your energy levels, maybe. But, and the removing of body consciousness makes you want to be still for a few hours. But you could certainly get up and function if you needed to or wanted to. Okay? And if used in smaller doses, it doesn't even cause much visual effects. Okay? And the visual effects on the smaller doses of 2, 3, 4 grams are pretty minor. Very minor. There's no grand hallucinations going on. You're not seeing crazy entities on those levels. You're in control. You're totally functional. Okay, and you're only really seeing a more vibrance in nature. And like I said before, there may be a slight rainbow fractaling, depending upon if you get a really, potent mushroom in your possession. But it's not overpowering. It's nothing. It's just more like you're seeing the mathematical, fractal of reality kind of, that's kind of an underlying component of life. So now, if you take too much of psilocybin, your experience will be so dramatic, yet you will never, ever want to do that again. All right? As far as I know, you cannot overdose on this stuff. I have no idea where extremely high doses of like 20 or 30 grams might do a person. I've taken 10 grams of a very potent, and I took it with turmeric and black pepper, which further strengthened the effects, okay? And I did that just to see what would happen, so I could speak about everything very clearly. And like I said, the experience, I'm not going to go into details. The experience was so dramatic. I will never do that again. Okay? And I think that's true for everybody. But after a day, you're fine. I was actually fine to drive even after doing that much after 4 or 5 hours. So you come back to ground very quickly, all right? But it's very uncomfortable for 2 or 3 hours. Let's put it that way. Very uncomfortable. And I'm sharing this because what other drug do you know that is kind of self-regulating? Like if you take too much, like I said, you will never do it again. It's self-regulating. You only really want to do very controlled amounts. Okay? And even on those high amounts or that amount, it left my body very cleanly. I could function with my family just fine after, 5 or 6 hours after that experience. It's okay, Don't have to be taken to the ER for this stuff. I don't think you ever would have to go to a doctor to deal with this. Extremely high dosage. So that speaks volumes for its safety. All right. So I guess one interesting side effect of this that seems to be somewhat widely reported is that you kind of feel like you just want to be like a better human being. Like that the people that do mushrooms generally seem to be just better people. Like you people you want to be around, positive minded individuals, people that treat life with respect, which is an interesting side effect that is worthy of note. Okay? So, what other chemical do you know, or something that's classified as a quote unquote drug, makes you want to be a better person? So the only other concern is that it's generally understood that if you have certain psychoses, such as schizophrenia and other things of that nature, that you do not want to take this drug. It does not work well for those people with those underlying psychological conditions. And there's actually a gal on YouTube that has a YouTube channel. I think it's called Living with Schizophrenia. I believe that's what it's called. It's a very honest, sharing that she's doing, where she talks about what it's like to have schizophrenia. She looks like she's 30 something, and she looks like, she's married. I don't know if she has kids or not, but she's together, right? She's together and she's sharing honestly what happens. But her husband apparently, this is the video I saw by her. Her husband apparently got some mushrooms, and they wanted to treat, I don't know if she was going to treat maybe some depression that she was experiencing, which is, just from, having schizophrenia and dealing with that. But it didn't go very well. Or I think it went okay the first time, but the second time they did it, it didn't go so well. It put her into a very psychotic state. So I'm just sharing this so, if you're an individual that has underlying psychological conditions, you need to approach this with a little bit of caution and maybe not do it at all. Okay. So now here's the way I feel psilocybin is working is that I feel like it's unlocking. It almost feels like a key going into a lock that's in human consciousness. And it clicks it open and allows you a greater receptivity to whatever you are applying your attention to. Okay, so this is where your consciousness, where I feel your personal expression and personal development of your consciousness comes into play. And that's where it gets very personal, I think, of the effects of psilocybin upon each individual. All right. So, and I believe that for those who are already spiritually disciplined, and that's how I consider myself, as a spiritually disciplined individual, I'm guessing I'm saying the effects are different and interesting, and my recordings will show you exactly what's happening as I document this. So just so you understand, every recording I'm making is more or less around the 2, the 3, the 4 hour mark after consuming psilocybin. Okay? Every single recording. Well, except my very first ones, which were me, actually with a camera. But all the other ones are the 2, the 3, the 4 hour mark after consuming psilocybin. Every single one of those. Okay? So I'm just documenting my state of consciousness, the thoughts that come through, my experiences on the path of being a seeker of the highest understanding of life. That's the purpose of all this, is documenting it while under the effects of psilocybin. Okay? It's all for science. So I also want to briefly mention how some of the younger generation are using this psilocybin occasionally for entertainment. They go to music festivals, maybe Burning Man, just various gatherings throughout life where they may be using it as a little bit more of an entertainment type of drug. All right. I'm just going to say that that is in my consideration, a less responsible approach to its use. Is it okay? I mean, people have free will. They can do what they want. Are they going to get out of it what I think it wants to do for them? That's debatable. Maybe there's certain selective instances where, everything plays out right, that they're in the right conscious space for a certain experience to happen. It's possible, but I think that's all debatable. And I'm just saying that because or what I want to say is, I guess if people are going to use it as an entertainment drug, I would say this. I think that's a far safer use of substances. If they're going to do something, I would say, yeah, if you're going to have to take an entertainment drug, do psilocybin more than anything else, because everything else is a laboratory created compound. And once you start getting into powderized substances, you are playing with fire, because you don't carry around lab equipment with you to actually test what's in that powder. You have no idea what you're putting into your body. No idea whose hands it's come through. Was it done by some cartel in Mexico? Was it done in some lab here in the States? Did somebody cut it? Did some middleman cut it with some other substance? And is there fentanyl in it? You have no idea. You are playing Russian roulette with any powderized drug, and that includes powders that are compressed into pill form. And all that stuff that's mimicking real prescription drugs or mimicking candies that kids may ingest, all right? So I'm sharing this because if you want to be smart, Stick with what nature provides. Consume it in its unadulterated form as like a pure mushroom. All right. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And I want to make a statement that by me sharing all this, I'm in no way, shape, or form recommending or encouraging substance use of any kind. This is all documentation. I'm doing this trying to document, and people can listen to it and consider if it's something that might be beneficial to them or not. That's all this is. So, yeah, just to recap, we're all using substances every single day. There's lots of mind-altering substances we're consuming. And even if you only eat food and drink no coffee, if you're just, a really pure person that really watches their diet, you are still altering your chemistry with food and chemicals, okay? And you're altering your mood and behavior. All of it alters your mood and behavior, every single bit of it. It's the honest truth. And most overlook this because it's so normalized. But if you're going to be truly an introspective individual in life, you need to be able to look at everything with complete honesty. Every bit of life, every bit of expression of your life, you need to look at it and analyze it and consider these things. All right. And if we want to go a step further into complete honesty, mankind are really deep in a mass psychosis of various levels. And that's an obstacle to looking at life very honestly and cleanly and purely, to analyze your life. The deep mass psychosis that mankind is under permeates societies beyond the borders of a country. It permeates societies on a global level. Okay? And this really came to the forefront when COVID came forth. How interesting people were gravitating to complete falsehoods that were being spoken by figures of authority. And then it was like so tribal how people were behaving like this. They were taking sides on a tribal level. And they were almost willing to kill neighbors over this psychosis. And I think everybody really needs to look at that. And because I think that was the first time when it really became so blatantly clear to those who are, who could sit there and look at life honestly and look at this behavior. And, children of the light, who are kind of on a path of remembering who they are pretty much the only ones who will be able to see and recognize this. But the majority of humanity are completely asleep. But it is more than that. This entire physical experience of life, of having a physical body, and your consciousness is kind of encased in a way, or revolving around, around this physical body. This entire physical experience and mental programming is a nearly unbreakable mass psychosis. And my personal feeling is that, some of these psychedelics, mostly speaking of mushrooms, of psilocybin, when used correctly, can help break you free from this mass psychosis. And this psychosis will even affect students in the light. Even people on the path that know a lot about, what's happening behind the scenes with beings of light and ascended masters and great teachers working to try to free mankind from this psychosis. Even those on the path can be caught up in it. So that's why I'm interested in experimenting with mushrooms in particular, is that I have a working theory that it can break people free very quickly, actually, from this psychosis and get them on the path. And then you can drop it. This is not something I recommend for lifelong usage, okay? I'm doing kind of an intensive study with it right now, but my feeling is that there are a lot of chemicals in life that will do certain things and if you use them right, you do it, you learn from it, and you drop it. All right? Like, you've learned everything you can from a specific chemical or drug, and then you move on. You embody its lessons and you move on. You don't become a chemical slave for the rest of your existence. That's completely foolish and completely self-destructive. So I'm trying to communicate this as responsibly as possible, and I hope people receive it as such and appreciate it for that. And feel free to give me feedback. I would like to hear people's feedback on this. And please be brutally honest. I'd like to hear opposing arguments. I'd like to hear other people's experiences if you wanted to share. Send it to my email, which is in the description below the video. I'd like to hear about it. Don't do it in comments. Send it to my email. All right, so I'm going to go one step further now, because I don't spend a lot of time diving deep into the rabbit hole of YouTube and everything, but how many people out there are even voicing what I'm saying? Are there others out there? Do any of you who actually listen to my stuff know of others who are voicing and talking about these same things that I maybe should see or look into? I'd like to know other brethren out there who are doing this. And how many out there are actually ready to hear this kind of stuff? My thought is that the more honesty and intensity of scrutiny of things in life that you actually get a lot fewer interested parties. And my experience is that most of mankind gravitate to those things that have more entertainment value, that have more maybe very, very entry-level understanding of things, because that's just where their consciousness is at, right? So the more entry-level that some people are discussing topics of any kind seem to generate a tremendous viewership. And it's my thinking that even with the greatest teachers, like let's say Jesus, how many people actually understood what he was talking about? His disciples, of course, right? He selected them specifically because he knew that they And he taught them the most, because we're talking 12 individuals is what Jesus could gather upon himself that had the potential for carrying on the greatest understanding. Right? And maybe some of the general populace that gathered about him occasionally, some of them may have received some greater illumination and understanding. But Jesus only brought 12 individuals into his intimate embrace. And there had to be a reason behind that. Gosh, I'm really going on another tangent now. I don't want to go too far. I was going to wrap up this video, but I mean, should I go down this tangent a little bit more? He only brought a handful of individuals into his intimate embrace and instruction. And even they were going to be limited on what they could grasp. I mean, I recognize that when I read some of the stuff in the Bible, that their understanding was kind of limited. And they were at the feet of one of the greatest teachers on the planet. So I'm going down, I guess I'm touching on this tangent because actually I forgot why I was even going down this tangent, honestly. But all right, so since I've forgotten why I went down this tangent, I'm going to go back to my main points, which are, that's what it was, how many people are out there that are really capable of this deep introspection into themselves and into life in general, that they do it fearlessly and talk about it? I think that's really very few. So I'm not expecting a great viewership of my content. I would be tremendously surprised if my videos ever get views into the thousands. Maybe that will happen over time, but it's going to be very slow, the people that find my stuff, because anyone who finds my content and actually listens and understands it is already going to be pretty good on their path. So I'm just saying that because that's just kind of how it is in life. You get, the people that are more entertaining, talking about very elementary topics, they're going to get viewerships and people into them, by the millions, because it's easier content to accept at their level of consciousness. That's just how it works. So, back on the topic now, the movie about the Matrix trilogy, that topic comes into general conversation about, that there's an underlying generated, illusion of life, right? That, the Matrix was approaching it from, like an alien standpoint of sorts. But really, we've created this illusion of life. It's self-created. This is the mass psychosis I talk about. You have to understand, we are all children of God with tremendous powers of God. And those powers of God that we have are our thought, feeling, and spoken word. Because all life is vibration. And when you use your thought, feeling, and spoken word, you are creating vibration. That is your power. And when it's misused, it can create a psychosis, a delusion, and an illusion of life, and a very limited expression of life that we see in this physical embodiment, this physical state of nature, this physical expression of life. Every bit of it has been created by the children of God. And it is a psychosis of limitation that is occurring through the misuse of these faculties. So it's also being talked about as another interesting term of it is called simulation theory, right? And the people that talk about in these circles are almost refusing to acknowledge what they are. They're creating these theories, the matrix theory and the simulation theory, because they are obstinately refusing to acknowledge that they are children of God, that they are embryos of such massive creativity and potential. And it's so unusual to me that people will be so absolutely obstinate in refusing to acknowledge this to some degree in their life. It's so weird to me. If you embrace it, you can be taught such tremendous truth, and you will recognize this truth on a level that is irreversibly, how am I going to say this? When you recognize truth, it is at a level of consciousness, it is irrefutable. Like, the truth can be understood on a level that, and you recognize this on a cellular level, and when you know it, you know it. And you'll never be able to tell people these kind of truths. You will never be able to share it, because when these truths come into your consciousness, they are a gift for your particular level of conscious understanding. And you can't just, as Jesus said, you can't cast your pearls before swine. That's how he termed it, because he couldn't tell people everything he understood about life. It would go over their heads, number one. They wouldn't be able to simulate it, number two. And number three, it could be a detriment. So, again, I go down a tangent. So, all right. So what I really want to say is, what I find crazy is how few are even discussing how you can get something called truth. True knowledge directly inputted into your consciousness, instead of fumbling through life through trial and error, and fumbling through life by overthinking and over-intellectualizing all these things, all the expressions of life. People are over-intellectualizing. Their intellect is becoming a trap. All these scientists and deep thinkers that I watched in these discussions on time, they are literally entrapping themselves by misusing their intellect. They're so engrossed with that one tool that it is enslaving them. And that's what I find so crazy, is that even those who are awakened enough, these various teachers on the path, I'm not really finding anybody that is teaching people how to progress and approach life where they can have direct experiences of truth, so they don't have to fumble around, that they don't have to turn to anybody again. Even their own teachers. Like, this is what made me have to leave my teacher. I reached a point of saturation and I recognized it. I was so saturated, I literally became repulsed at hearing anything, of even sitting in his presence. I had to leave. And that was a very fascinating experience that I'm not going to go dive into right now. But yeah, I mean, that's how you know you're done. You need to go out and process and start being what you just learned. You reach a point of saturation. But nobody that I know of, and I hope if somebody knows of these individuals, they'll share them with me, because I would like to know. But I'm not finding many people that are actually teaching individuals how to get on this path where they can have the truth spoken straight into their consciousness. It's like uploading or downloading, however you want to look at it, truth into your being, and you will stop fumbling through life. It's the most immensely useful activity you could be doing. And somehow I'm finding the uses of psilocybin as a very powerful tool in this process. Because like I said, it makes you feel like you're wielding a scalpel of light, and you're able to dissect things, dissect consciousness, dissect ideas, and cut through them very precisely, and analyze them, and assimilate them if it is useful and constructive and beneficial and helps you progress. So I'm actually surprised of all the mystics and teachers out there, that how few are really seeming to do this. I hope it's not because they've plateaued and kind of enjoying the comfortness of being in, surrounded by a bunch of seekers of light. I really hope it's not that they've gotten so comfortable in that position that they lose their potency of expression and potential to give to these students and seekers. So anyway, I think that's a deep enough dive. And I'm going to combine this recording with the other one, which is going to retouch on some of these tangents, but I think it's just a useful closure to this. So bless you all. I wish you the best on your path and journey at all times. And I honestly want to hear from anybody through my email, which is in the description below, if you've got any input on anything I've said. All right, take care. So, what started off as kind of a fun exercise of making recordings of what was going through my mind has now turned into a thing I spend a lot of time doing. And it's changed. It's still fun. It's still extremely enjoyable. It's turned into something I absolutely love doing. And so what started off with me is just sharing some recordings I was making to some friends. It's now grown into, or turned into, this is in me, something I'm much more passionate about. And I feel like if I actually send out these links to friends, it could be perceived that I'm seeking attention. And so I am going to cease doing that. But I'm making this very last video before I stop doing that. I'm going to send it out to you guys. It's me discussing my perspective of psilocybin. Because with a couple people in my circle of acquaintances and life acquaintances, they have a different perspective than I do. I respect that. Absolutely. We should always respect people's different opinions on things and hear them out. So this last video, I didn't make this just because of that, though. This just flowed out this morning, and I kind of took notes. I took physical notes on it, and then this afternoon I'm kind of working on it some more, just shaping it, because it's a very broad topic. And there's a lot of global interest on this topic right now. And because when psilocybin hits the market and when the laws start to change, I'm actually very interested to see what's going to happen. I was completely non-interested in marijuana. I do not like marijuana. I don't think it's actually a very good thing. I love hemp. I think hemp as a material is way more interesting than marijuana, but apparently some people find some medical use for marijuana, and that's okay. But I think there's a lot of misuse. And it concerns me. It concerns me raising a daughter when she discovers marijuana. I'm actually not that concerned if she discovers mushrooms. I'm not going to be telling her anything about them. But I'm way less concerned about mushrooms than I am about marijuana. I think there's tremendous misuse, and it is not healthy to be sucking smoke into your lungs, number one, no matter, the effects on the brain and everything else that it's doing. And there is extremely underreported effects of psychosis happening through marijuana use. It's just barely getting the light of day in the news. Barely. We're going to be hearing a lot more of this because that marijuana has been made so potent through genetic manipulation. It has become so potent. And people need to be careful with what they're doing. But this is just my personal view. I'm not judging whatever people do in their life. If they make the choice, they may be having very good effects. And I guess if you're making the choice of using marijuana as a replacement for doing something from the pharmaceutical realm, some kind of lab-grade powder that they've concocted, then I would say, yeah, maybe you're making a smart decision. Because I wouldn't touch anything coming out of pharma with a 10-foot pole. I really have to think about even taking aspirin. I really think about it before I do it, if it's really necessary. If I am incapacitated enough by the headache that it's really affecting my function of the day, then I might. But it's not automatic. I don't just pop pills. But what's interesting is, I'm going to say this in a funny way, but I'll pop mushrooms all day long. To me, it's tremendously safe. As long as you keep it in small quantities, right? Smaller quantities. I would say 3 to 4 grams at the max. But I mean, there is no side effects that I can tell so far. Remember, I'm doing this as an experiment. I don't plan to be doing this my whole life. I will not become a chemical slave. I'm way stronger than that. Way stronger. I see life too clearly to ever become a chemical slave. But like I said, I'll pop mushrooms all day long, but I will think real clearly about touching anything coming out of Big Pharma, including Tylenol. All that stuff has it's not just an upside. There's a big downside to everything coming out of pharma. Big downside. Because as I keep saying, when they isolate and refine everything to the highest purity, that's not how nature provided it. Nature is providing all these chemicals for us. And when used correctly, by consuming unadulterated nature, it's much safer. I'm speaking of all chemicals in our life. I just barely started using tea like 2 years ago. I did not want caffeine in my system. But I've started to enjoy matcha because there seems to be a lot of tremendous beneficial side effects of matcha because you're consuming the whole leaf. Okay? It's the only tea where you consume the entire leaf. But the caffeine in coffee is way different than matcha. You go through these up and down swings. And matcha doesn't do that. It's kind of like slow release. But that's exactly why I'm speaking so highly of mushrooms, because you consume a mushroom and there's other compounds in the mushroom. They're known as alkaloids. And I think there's 3 or 4, which are no one really knows exactly how they're affecting the body yet and the mind. And I'm not a huge proponent of how Big Pharma is trying to, obviously they're already doing this. They're synthesizing psilocybin or psilocin, and that's what they're giving to people in these therapy sessions. And it seems to be producing some good. Okay, I recognize the good, but I'm concerned about the long-term effects of, again, isolating a particular compound instead of taking exactly what nature provides. And I realize the rationale is because it's very hard to control dosage when you're just taking the natural thing, the natural mushroom. But is it better of having slightly varied dosage versus potential side effects of not having all these other alkaloids in their natural environment being ingested? And again, people might get their hands on synthetic psilocybin and it could end up, in the black market being mixed with something dangerous like fentanyl, which is killing everybody who's not already a heroin addict. So, I just really wanted to be real, is that, we all are already using tons of chemicals in our life. If you really look at everything honestly and assess it, people that they classify something as a psychedelic, and instantly it has this association with the most destructive drugs out there. But in reality, it is probably the safest thing out there. Because like I said, if you even try to misuse it, and take a large amount, you will be so utterly wrecked by it, you will never do it again. Okay? And I've tested this just so I could truly know. Because like I said, I'm a living experiment right now in how I'm ingesting this every single day. And so I really want to know everything about how it will behave with people so I can speak about it clearly, speak about any concerns that arise, and definitely speak about any benefits. But I'm also using it in a manner where I don't have, as far as I know, any underlying conditions of any kind, mental or physical or elsewise. I'm using this as what I'll call as a healthy individual using it for self-discovery. And to me, that is the most responsible use of something like this that there can be. So I think people should be way more concerned about their caffeine, tobacco, or alcohol intake, or marijuana intake, or sugar intake. All these things can kill you. There are kids dying from marijuana edibles. People die from sugar intake, or they get a condition, right, that wrecks them, that kills their kidneys. And then they have to be on pharma drugs for the rest of their life, unless a miracle occurs. Maybe there's some way to reverse it that we haven't discovered yet, but you really have to be careful with that stuff. But if you even try to misuse mushrooms, you will be so wrecked. And I'm using that word, in a humorous manner, because the stuff you will see is so, I'm not going to say traumatizing, but it's concerning that you will never want to do that again. You will never want to do that again. It's self-regulating. I mean, what other drug out there is self-regulating and has no side effects that we know of, that doesn't put you on an up and down roller coaster of emotional states like caffeine will? Caffeine is a dangerous drug that puts you on a roller coaster. You need to be careful getting so addicted to it. And it's addictive. Sugar's addictive. Alcohol's addictive. Marijuana's addictive. In a way. Mushrooms are not addictive. You're in full control. At least my experience is. You are never out of control. You are perfectly functioning. It's non-addictive. There's no side effects. Except the laughable one where I say, you feel like you just want to be a better human being. So if that's a side effect, then that's okay in my book. I know people should really be more careful about these things that are so commonly used by society that they go completely under the radar of your scrutiny. Right? That's what's occurring. It's so normalized in society that it goes under your radar. It misses your scrutiny for the most part. So that's what I had to say about it. And that's why, I guess I'll share this recording eventually with anybody that seems to pose pushback on what I'm doing. I think this is a really honest perspective on this. It's just, of anything out there that could possibly help mankind, this seems to be it. Of course, these same laboratories and same universities, Johns Hopkins and Harvard and Yale and all these big institutions, they're not only studying psilocybin, they're also studying MDMA and ketamine, right? And ketamine is dangerous because it is also extremely addictive. People are dying from ketamine addiction. I don't know, honestly, that much about MDMA, otherwise known as ecstasy. I don't know that much about it. I've never taken it. Like I said, I do not take anything. I will never take anything that is laboratory made. Well, that's not true. I took LSD once. Once. That was enough. It's okay. But I don't trust all these things. I trust nature. I trust nature will provide us something. I mean, it can provide deadly toxins too. But speaking about mushrooms, I trust it. It's doing something very interesting. And like I said, it's more like a tool that unlocks something in your consciousness when used in this manner. And I think it's worthy of exploration. It's very safe. And the moment I have a different opinion of it, I will say so. I will definitely say if I discover some kind of negative side effect over prolonged use. I have no problem making course corrections and being brutally honest with myself and others. It's a necessary thing in life. We need more of it, not less. We need more brutal honesty. And for people who are going to get through this mass psychosis. So I didn't really mean to go down this lengthy tangent. This was supposed to be like a 10-second recording that I was going to just attach to something I was sending some people. But now it's kind of grown. I just kind of went. So I will need to make, I don't know if I'm going to attach this. I might make this recording at the end of the recording I've actually been structuring. I've actually been writing some material down. So I think, and some of this what I spoke is in there. So I will probably, I will most likely just attach this at the end as kind of a conclusion to my other rant. I will go on. All right. Thank you, loved ones.